The things that you can do are really cool. If you look at the cryptography research that's coming out, zero knowledge stuff, just succinct proofs in general, even statement recursive proofs, research in cryptography like FHE is fully holomorphic encryption. I'm just happy the blockchain space is spearheading a lot of innovation, especially in the zero knowledge space.
Scraping Bits is brought to you by the following sponsors. MEV Protocol. Maximize your ETH staking value with MEV ETH, exclusively on mev.io. And Composable. Execute any intent on any chain, coming soon to mantis.app. That's mantis.app. And Fastlane Labs, the only MEV and intent-centric team that has a daily deodorant application rate of over 68%.
DM everyone, my name's DeGatchi, your host from Scraping Bits, and today I have a special guest from Trail of Bits, Techno99. How's it going, friend?
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming on as well. You should give a little intro of who you are and what you do, just to give some context.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, I'm Techno99. I'm a security engineer at Trail of Bits on the blockchain team, which means I do audits. I also do some vulnerability research and cryptography research on the side. And yeah.
Perfect. So how about we start off with how you got into Trail of Bits and how you started your journey into basically Web3.
Yeah, sounds good. So I tell the story like ad nauseum to everyone I meet because I find it pretty funny. I was a university student. I actually didn't have a computer science background. I majored in math. I wanted to go for my PhD in math because I spent time in university doing research. I heard of Bitcoin, obviously, but I'm like, oh, I don't really know what that is. Could be a scam, whatever. But it was in the back of my mind because we see all these wild price swings. But I never considered I want to, be like an auditor or, oh, I want to work in crypto. Because my entire goal was just I want to get a PhD in math. And so I was applying and course, I chose the worst time to apply, which was COVID time. And I didn't get in anywhere, which was really sad because I spent years of my life trying to get in. And then they're like, yeah, because of budget cuts, we can't really take too many people. So try again next year. I had an existential crisis where I'm like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Do I try again? And then I just remember spending some time thinking about it. I remember actually going on this forum called the Grad Cafe and just reading some posts there. And then there was one guy who was like, yeah, this is my 10th year applying and I finally got in. I got rejected for the past 9 years. And I was like, do I really want to be like this? Is this what I want to do with my life? I figured, okay, I need to get a job doing something. What is something I enjoy? I don't want to be a math teacher. I realized I can't use my degree for much. So I was interested in cybersecurity and stuff because my dad, he's a software engineer, but he always would talk about cryptography and how it's cool and just how things work. So I started actually trying to just get Web 2 certification, just for the OSCP. But then I remember this was when Bitcoin crashed and everything. And I started looking into it a bit more because one of my professors in college, I didn't really like him. So that's probably why I looked into it. But he was like, Warren Buffett says Bitcoin is rat poison squared. So I was like, okay, well, why does he say that? And then you read the Bitcoin white paper, you just learn more and more. And it's like, oh, wait, this is interesting. And then you go into Ethereum. This was right before DeFi summer took off. And it's this is pretty cool. And then it just drew me in from the start because I guess I was pretty interested in what crypto stand for, what you could do with it. Obviously, everyone just thinks it's minting JPEGs, but there are pretty cool use cases for it, the way things work, how they behave. So I just got sucked in. And then people were saying, if you want to learn, you go on Twitter. So I made a Twitter. And then the first thing I saw on Twitter was there's this guy named TS11 who was writing some weird assembly. I'm like, how the hell does this relate to Ethereum or whatever? So that's how I started getting into Solidity. I found it really cool and really fun. I think this was back in the optimizer meta where everyone was, I saved one gas by using E0 instead of GT. And then it was pretty cool. It was just a fun game. That's how I got into it, crypto in general and Solidity specifically and just blockchain. And then from there, I was like, okay, this is interesting, but I'm not sure what I should do, how I should make a job of it. I didn't know if I wanted to be a dev or I wanted to be a researcher. So I remember I was just doing this thing called build space because back then I'd never programmed anything. The most I did was writing some Mathematica, which is something that mathematicians use to generate graphs or just formulate data. So no programming experience. So I did this thing called build space, which was introducing people how to develop Web3 projects. And then I started doing JavaScript stuff and I hated JavaScript. So I'm like, okay, I do not want to be a full stack dev because this language is terrible. So then I was like, the only thing I really enjoy is I like writing Solidity. I like optimizing things. And then I figured this is actually complete stroke of luck because At this point, I graduated university. I had a degree. I had no job. I have no prospects. My parents are like, what is this kid going to do with his life? Is he just going to be like 50 and still living with us? And I remember I'm like, okay, I need to find a job. And the day I said that, I remember scrolling through like the Build Space Discord, and they're like, there's this apprenticeship at Trail of Bits. And like, I clicked on it. And yeah, I've heard of Trail of Bits. People are like, oh, this is like this really cool audit firm, know a lot about program analysis and everything. So I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to like work there. But so I kind of just like did all the CTFs. I spent time like researching vulnerabilities. And honestly, like that period of my life was like so much fun because I would just wake up and like do CTFs or look at crypto. And it was just like so much information. I learned a lot during that time, managed to pass an interview. And then, wow, it's been like a year, but yeah, here I am since then.
Oh, wow. So you spent basically a year doing CTFs, going on Twitter, learning as much as possible.
It actually wasn't a year. I don't understand how I did this myself, but I graduated university in June of 2021, right? Then for like 3-4 months, I was wandered around, did nothing, was just down bad pretty much. And then I remember, I think it was in like October or September, I like found that post about Trail of Bits hiring apprentices. And then from September to December, I would just wake up and just look at crypto stuff. That's it. And it was like so much fun. It just felt like playing a game. And I would just do that for like 3-4 months. And then I applied, I got an interview, and I passed February of 2022. I've been working here.
Yeah, so how was the preparation for the apprenticeship interview then? Was it pretty streamlined? Did you already know stuff, or did you panic?
Dude, I was so panicked because to me, the only thing I knew was like math, right? I spent time researching iterated function systems and dynamically defined candidate sets, and now I'm doing something completely different. I remember looking at Twitter and the people applying for this apprenticeship, they like, oh, like I've been coding since I was like 2 years old.
Yeah,
And like,
crazy.
yeah, I have a reference from like Buddha himself. So I was just like, okay, I am so screwed. All I can do is just study everything. I did all the CTFs they said, like I just looked at Hack. I remember every security resource or like assembly resource or just like Solidity, Footgun, like I could find. I was just reading through. And in the past like 2 years, something I've noticed, like there's a lot more resources. Back then, it was like, I think the only things like I could really find were like the smart contract registry from Consensus, I think. There was like Christoph's blog, Mudit's blog.
Oh, yeah.
So like just reading those, trying to just absorb everything I could. And I guess luckily for me, that was enough to pass an interview and show that I was basically competent enough to succeed.
Yeah, crazy. I'm surprised I didn't even do that because I even did I think I did 2 interviews with them. I think I passed one, but then I just like fell off. TLDR, didn't get hired. Twice. But yeah, man, that's super exciting, especially coming out of university. I'm sure you've learned like a terrific amount since then as well. How was the onboarding to that?
Oh yeah, one thing like I have to give credit where credit is due. I think Trail of Bits is a fantastic company because the apprenticeship was like, I mean, it threw you in. This is like the audit process. This is how we start. So not only did I learn a lot of how the big players do it, their process, I got to work with really talented people. I guess this is something maybe a lot of people don't realize because on Twitter, you only see people who have a bajillion followers, but like there are some people who just enjoy what they do and they're really talented. Just being around people who are like, they know a lot and they're really good. I remember like on some audit, there's this random Solidity Footgun that like I didn't even know. I didn't see anywhere.
Yeah.
And someone was like, yeah, this is a bug. And I'm like, how do you know this? They're really talented. I loved working there. I learned a lot. And I also learned like something, I guess that's underrated, is a bit more on like the soft skill side, dealing with clients, writing reports, those kinds of things.
Definitely.
And yeah, and I would say the apprenticeship was like a really great learning opportunity because I would consider myself a beginner. I still think I'm a beginner in some aspects, but like that apprenticeship like really solidified what I knew and I learned so much from it. I was just really happy that I got to go through that.
Yeah, learning from basically the best in the field in Web 2 and Web 3 is really quite an experience.
That's something else is like, because I would like, basically I went from, knowing about like esoteric math topics that no one cares about to like only knowing about like Solidity vulnerabilities and then realizing, wait, oh, like program analysis is like a huge field. Like I didn't know anything. And then people were talking about, this is how a fuzzer works. This is like how static analysis works. Here, like we have static analysis tools like Slither. Do you want a walkthrough of how it works? And I'm like, yeah, okay, sounds great. So you learn all these new things. And one thing I really do love is just learning about new things. And so it was like a dream come true for me because I got to learn about auditing. I got to learn about like all these interesting things I didn't even know existed. So I was a pretty happy guy.
Yeah, and I think the math background definitely is a massive advantage in cybersecurity as well, especially auditing in DeFi. You're going to come across a lot of math.
Yeah, I guess the universe does have a sense of humor because like when I was applying, I'm like, I wasted my life like learning these stupid like math topics no one cares about. It definitely does make comprehending a lot of these, I guess, if you audit DeFi protocols, you'll see some like really complex formula for calculating the liquidation amount. Having a math background just makes it easier. And one thing that it really does, I guess, one thing that's I think is really cool is if you just do some numerical analysis classes in college, you kind of learn like how the function looks, and then you can see, oh, okay, there's going to be like edge cases here, and then sometimes there might be bugs in those edge cases. I wouldn't change a thing about how everything ended up, because even though I didn't have a computer science background, having a math background definitely came in clutch in the end, which is super nice.
Yeah, it sounds like it all just fell into place and it was like the perfect scenario that could have happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I feel. I'm really happy about it.
Seems like it, yeah. I'm similar, minus the background in math. I took like a practical approach and was like, okay, what do I need? I just found interest in blockchain through investing. And then through investing, I want to get a better edge. So I learned to code. And then eventually I just fell down that rabbit hole instead.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's path, because the first thing I ever did in like crypto, learning how to use my MetaMask, was like obviously gambling on shitcoins and losing everything.
Yeah.
But then like I wouldn't change a thing, because the way I view it, that was like an initial investment to get my career started. Because then I'm like, oh, how does this exactly work? And the funny thing is, I could think recently I went back and like looked at some of those projects. I'm like, why did I ever even touch this? This code is so bad.
Yeah, exactly. I think as an investor, you don't even think about the code, the underlying technology behind it. You just see the marketing, and that's what dictates your decision with investing.
That's
especially like hype. Hype is like the main thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm of the opinion, I think like most engineers are, is like marketing kind of sucks. I understand why it's necessary, but like to me, I would rather just evaluate a product on its own merit. But of course, that's not how modern day society functions. That's aside. But yeah, marketing, everything is going to the moon. And then you see their code and there's like, why is there a reentrancy here? This is pretty basic, but
it's literally just a standard ERC20.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a math background would definitely help in informal verification as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, actually, something that I also really like about my math background is you make computer science like kind of easier to learn, because a lot of the abstract concepts I think people would struggle with, if you just think from a mathematical background, like doing math, it just helps you think abstractly or think in like a certain way. For example, like when I was looking more into like type theory and stuff, it made a bit more sense. I feel like if I didn't have that background, it was a bit too abstract and I'd be like really confused. But like when you understand the definition, same with a lot of common compiler stuff, right? Like how to like an AST, how do we represent a program, an IR, like things like that. The more abstractly you can think, you can piece things together pretty fast. So I think that definitely gave me an edge. I wouldn't say I'm like very knowledgeable about it, but I got up to speed a little bit quicker than the average person would.
Yeah, I would love to touch on like IR as well, in intermediate representation. So basically before every kind of symbolic execution or setting up for fuzzing or a symbolic static analysis, you would basically put it into IR, correct?
It depends, actually. For example, the most basic thing you can do is just when you compile something, you obviously go from high-level language to a bytecode, and then they're typically in modern compilers that's just done through an intermediate representation, because it makes program analysis and optimization a lot easier. But like if you really wanted to, you could just basically generate a syntax tree, walk through the syntax tree and do an analysis pass that's primitive. So there's like multiple different flavors of representing your code, so you can do like static analysis on it. I think I'm obviously not an expert, but in the modern day, I think most advanced compilers will just use an IR. Like Solidity obviously has its own IR. In fact, Slither also has its own IR, because it makes like program analysis a lot easier. And if you look at something like the Cairo programming language, which is used on StarkNet, if you look at how it worked before, when the compiler was just compiling directly to like assembly and bytecode, it was pretty primitive. But when you introduce an IR, you can do a lot more optimizations. You can enforce a lot of constraints. Again, as an example, in Cairo, right? When you compile down to this IR called Sierra IR, the Sierra IR basically has a type system that lets you enforce the constraints of the programming language you want. There are different flavors of representing a program. Using the intermediate representation is probably like the most common now, because it just allows for easier optimization and analysis passes than just compiling directly to bytecode.
Sure. And then through that, then you can do your program analysis, basically.
Yeah. It's typically like common that you can leverage the IR to build program analysis, because you can obviously like just walk across the AST and do analysis, but like over the IR, I think it's called, typically the IR is done using something called like SSA, which is static single assignment. It makes like every variable immutable, and doing that like really lets you have like more fine-grained like analysis techniques you can do for like complicated patterns.
Yeah, so SSA is basically creating a new value for each basically step within the bytecode. So let's say like you have variable A, B, and then you have variable C, which is add would be C. So A, B, C, and then I guess if you want to add something else, let's say multiply by this, then that would be like another step in the alphabet, and it just keeps going basically. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I remember someone told me about that in the reverse engineering group chat. I tried it, but it didn't really help me when I was doing my kind of stuff, my fuzzing. I just did the straight read from bytecode.
For fuzzing, it's a bit different because static analysis, you don't actually run the program, right? So having some sort of representation would make it a lot easier. I think there's different kinds of fuzzing, obviously, right? But for fuzzing, since it's dynamic, you can actually run the source code. You don't really need intermediate representation unless I'm not an expert on this, obviously, but I'm sure someone from my company will know. But if you're doing, I think, gray box or black box fuzzing, maybe having an IR would be better. But yeah, I'm not too sure about that.
It gets a bit complicated when you're using embedded dynamic, basically variables. So for example, you're using 0x00 call data, then using that call data value for the next call data offset. Like when you start nesting it just becomes so much more complex and very hard to predetermine without symbolic execution, I think, or just like fuzzing in general. But I would like to ask, like, how was the kind of auditing process different in a big company compared to something like a public contest?
So like, I guess this is a big point of contention because everyone is talking about audit contests versus firms. And then you have everyone on Twitter just saying, oh, like our firm, like just hire people from like, just do Code Arena or something. And I think obviously it makes sense because Code Arena, there's 100 people looking at your code, and as a security engineer, you have just the people at the company. But one thing I think that is like a bit different with our auditing process in specific is like, we use our tools and like we give like higher level recommendations to the client. So like, because I guess I used to do some contests sometimes, but to that it was just, oh, I'm just gonna find a bug, here it is, submit my report, and then I'm done. But and you have, I guess, a deeper relationship with the client. Typically, you're like, oh, this is something that like could go wrong. Do you want to consider redesigning it in this way because it would be more secure? Or downstream, like there could be like these economic consequences. It's not like they're vulnerabilities per se, but just like get like helping people think in a more security focused way. Because when you're a developer, I feel like you just care about making the product work, right? From our perspective, we're just trying to investigate every way it can go wrong. Not even, oh, this is a critical loss of funds, right? It just, would people be incentivized economically to behave in this way? And could this lead to a certain situation? Or designing something like this could be a bit error prone down the line. We would recommend against that. So it's like having that sort of deeper relationship with the client. And another thing I think we do is we use our tools. For longer audits, we'll write dedicated fuzzing harnesses for them, and we'll help them set it up on their end. They can learn like, how should we keep testing our code and refactoring? I think the value proposition is a little bit different with an audit contest versus going to a firm, and especially a firm like ours that has experience with program analysis and stuff.
I think there's two big trade-offs with going with a firm and an established company, but it definitely seems like you're paying a premium for basically a firm. But having said what you said, it definitely seems like a good investment as well. You're basically giving them architecture advice for long-term success instead of just short-term, okay, does this work? It works, all right, release it. It's more like improving.
I think that's like kind of a big thing because the company's motto is we don't fix bugs, we fix software, right? Our goal isn't just to be like, you have these bugs. It's like, how can we help you getting better development practices or like testing practices? Is like these kinds of bugs don't even happen in the first place because like, just like not to throw shade, but there have been like some projects that just got like a bunch of audits and they're like the audit reports is lit up every time. And then they're just like, okay, we'll redesign and get another audit. But then there are really subtle bugs that like occur, and it's not like everyone can find everything all the time. So we just think that like having people have like just secure development flow is a better idea, like long term. Obviously, like you still need an audit, you still need like other people to look at your code. But yeah, like we would like just to raise the bar of security and secure development practices.
And it doesn't hinder the amount of clients you attract as well, because if this was really something that was detrimental to your company's success, then it wouldn't be done. But it's not. It's actually doing the opposite. It would bring a lot more people to come in because it's not actually eliminating you as a service. You're still helping people improve their code and securing it at the same time. So it's really like one stone and two birds situation.
Exactly.
Instead of the opposite. Even though you're helping them basically eradicate you, it's still something they want and they keep coming back. Otherwise, it wouldn't be working. You wouldn't be up.
That's a good way to put it.
And I think it's also important, you touched on this before the podcast, that you're given time to basically learn and choose what you want to do for a period of time. Elaborate on that for a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because this is like probably one of the parts of the company I like the most. I mean, in between audits, we typically have some time called IRAD, which is internal research and development. So like you can go and I'm not gonna say you can do whatever you want because like I'm not just gonna slack off with a beer in my hands during IRAD. I have to learn something, but you can just like go in any direction you please because the world of blockchain is like super big, right? There's like different architectures for like nodes. There's advanced cryptography being used. Obviously, we develop tools on the side, so you can just, oh, okay, I guess this week, like on IRAD, I want to contribute to this tool. So like help make some PRs here. Or there is something interesting in this audit that like I want to, give a presentation on so like everyone will know how it works. And so we can do that. And it's just like really free form and lets me explore my own interests. So I've been doing a lot of like cryptography research because I find zero knowledge proofs really interesting. And so we actually have a crypto team too. And like during my IRAD, if I want to like shadow a crypto audit, I would be able to do that.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. Like a dream company sounds like. Because if someone's just working their whole life and they don't really have a lot of time outside of work to basically study what they want, and they're going to burn out or get incredibly demotivated. So I think this is a terrific way to expand the employee skills and allow them to collaborate even further and learn from other people, not even in their kind of section or sector.
Yeah, that's something I like really plus 100 to that because I don't think I'll ever get burnt out. It's been a year and I still want to like keep working, keep learning because I can go in any direction I please. Like after an audit, like let's say, oh, okay, I've been looking at like Decode for like a month. I want to investigate Cairo or I want to investigate like how Cosmos works. Okay, I can go do that. It's just nice and just chilling. Everyone at my company is like super great. I can only really say positive things.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And talking about cryptography, how did you get into that and what are you doing in that sense?
Yeah, I'm going to be glad to share this because it's been super fun. So obviously I have a math background. One thing, I guess, I said I wouldn't change anything. One thing I would change is I'd probably go more into the cryptography side because I did more on the algebraic side, like particularly with regards to the complex analysis and stuff. So I've had a math background, but cryptography was interesting. And then cryptography kind of underpinned everything. Like we're communicating through like TLS, right? So there's encryption there. When you upload something, it's encrypted. Your credit card is encrypted. It's figuring out how these works. And then in blockchain specifically, you hear like ZK everything. What is ZK? Like figuring out these things are just really cool. And again, since I have some spare time, I can look into that. And we have a crypto team. So like I always ask them questions, probably too many questions. I get to just learn about those things on the side too.
You ever gone into ZK, like deep dive?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say like I'm an expert or anything, but I've definitely been using some of my like time to research, I guess the modern like IVC systems, like Planchet arithmetization, things like that, the new latest and greatest. So it gets like pretty complicated, I think. I think I'm still like the noob because like Nova and all those like statement folding schemes have been broken. And I was trying to read it. I'm like, okay, why exactly? I'll probably have to read it like 10 more times to understand. But yeah, it's like super interesting. I guess I've just been looking into like just traditional polynomial commitment schemes, Peterson commitments, like IPA, like KZG, whatever. And then I guess Blanc or like the new proving systems. There have been so many proving systems, it's hard to keep track of all of them. But like, I think I understand how like Turbo Blanc, Ultra Blanc work, custom gates and things like that. And just understand ZK EVM architecture, like barely, not like super well, but it's definitely something interesting to keep looking into.
Yeah, it's such a complex topic as well, the whole cryptography field. And then I think the only thing that really emerges in blockchain is just ZK, and that's what's pilling everyone into cryptography.
Maybe. I guess when I heard of it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. You can prove like ZK everything. We're going to prove like something without revealing it. And then naturally you're like, okay, but like how though? And then, you just like dive through the math and you look at it and then you're like, oh, wow, this is super cool. It does get like technical, but I'm really happy I have a math background because I feel like because I spent time at school like studying things like pairings or like some like algebraic geometry like concepts, it's not like super hard to dive into. Whereas if I didn't, I'd have to spend a lot of time like getting up to speed on the math first.
Yeah, let's say someone did want to get into ZK from scratch and didn't have any experience in math or cryptography. What kind of like pathway do you think they should take?
The great thing is that I've recently noticed is I don't think you actually need to you don't need to have a degree in math. I think like this broadly applies to anything because we have access to the internet, right? All the education is there. I think I would just recommend picking up a basic cryptography course, like Crypto 1 on Coursera is really good. Like I went through that. And then if there's any concepts you don't understand, but you can just look it up or you can just find like a number theory, like prime. There's like a whole bunch of like prime where you don't need to be an expert in like group theory or like group actions or know like the silo theorems or whatever. You just need to know this is a group, this is how it behaves. Okay, how do we use them in cryptography? This is like a pairing, this is an elliptic curve, right? You don't need to be like an expert in like the exact nitty-gritty details on like actual math, but you just need a broad idea, and that can just be like supplemented just through Google or like various primers that people put out.
Got you. Yeah, yeah. I think the cryptography scene is definitely an interesting thing to witness, even though I don't understand it fully. I think it's definitely
Neither do I, brother. It's okay.
yeah, it's quite some time to actually appreciate the underlying tech and what people are doing with it, but it's definitely the future in terms of like private data being publicly.
The things that you can do are really cool, especially if you look at like the ways like the cryptography research that's coming out with, like just zero knowledge stuff, or like just succinct proofs in general, and then even like statement like recursive proofs. And then also I think like just other like research in cryptography, like FHE is super, like fully homomorphic encryption is super interesting. And then yeah, I guess like cryptography is like really cool, and there's a lot of like really cool things you can do with it. I'm just happy that the blockchain space is spearheading a lot of innovation, especially in the zero knowledge space.
Yeah, blockchain is quite fascinating because it hits a lot of different fields in one kind of like area. You got basically the business side where you're building a company, you can do all that normal stuff, but then you're also hitting economics. How do you manage basically money? How do you make it worth something, inherently worth something? You learn math, you learn so many things, man.
Yeah, it's really like interdisciplinary. That's something that I also found like super cool. Today's like computer science, there's programming, there's game theory, there's economics, there's cryptography. Like it just touched on so many different areas. One thing that's really cool is like people, who specialize in like all sorts of areas. Like there's like a bunch of economics professors. I think they claim to be economics professors on Twitter, at least, who like, analyze like DeFi protocols and ask like specific interesting questions, like, and then try to formulate it economically. There's people who, obviously like work on the coding and development side. It's just so fascinating because there's so many different things. I wish I had enough time to learn it all, but that would probably take several lifetimes.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why you gotta go into your niches. And I think even just exploring like something you're doing now, you can branch off into multiple things after you've learned something about that. Or maybe it's just from talking to someone about that certain topic, then they mention something, you're like, oh, this is interesting. Let's kind of dive into this in my spare time then.
It's definitely like fun to just go down rabbit holes, but like it's also really easy to spread yourself too thin, and you're just like, you don't have like much in-depth knowledge into something, but you just know like a bunch about random things. So it's like a trade-off, and you need to like kind of balance it to make sure you're not just like, oh, I know about this, I don't really understand. Because especially as a security researcher, your job is, the way I view it is like, your job is to be able to understand these things like to an extreme level. So like just having a surface level knowledge in a lot of things doesn't really help you. So sometimes you just have to be like, okay, I don't really care about this. So like, I'm not an expert in like nodes or anything. Obviously I know the basics, right? But like, for example, like in really detailed, I don't know like the get code in detail. I understand like basics of how it works, but like if you ask me something in specifics, I won't know how nodes should be designed. Again, have the basic idea. Cosmos, kind of know how it works, the very basics, because I don't have the time to like actually sit there and look into everything.
Yeah, you got to find something that you're really passionate about, something that interests you, because that's how you stay consistent and eventually get to the master level, or get to a level where you're quite comprehensive. You comprehend the field in a very deep way. And I think from that, you're able to innovate and identify what's missing in the area. And then that's when it gets interesting, in my opinion. Sure, learning and the journey getting to that kind of state is also really fun. But if you don't find interest in that journey, then the end game is just going to get harder and you're not going to enjoy it, because that's when you have no resources and you have to basically think of new ways and new primitives to invent. You got to pave the way for the future.
Yeah, I guess it does relate to auditing, because I guess when I started out, you spend your time reading other people's reports and, oh, okay, that makes sense. But like having to figure it out yourself is a whole nother ballgame. It's, like, could this be problematic? I don't know. Like, it's not like pattern matching, right? You have to think differently. I do think it's like after a certain point, there's no like guide, on like how to be like really good. You just have to discover how you do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe talk to someone that is really good and see how they progressed over their lifetime or their career. I think that's also a very great way. But obviously that's also very hard to do, because you have to grab a hold of them and then you have to try and make questions to extract information in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But one thing I will say that I really like about, I guess, just like the blockchain space in general is like it's pretty like open. You find someone's Twitter, like you DM them, like sure, they'll be busy. In my experience, like most people, they reply. It's not like some like elite club or anything. It's, oh, like I'm curious about this. Yeah, sure, I can help you explain it. I have some time. It's just very open and people are very receptive, just like helping each other out.
Yeah, you can just DM a founder or like a really high-end dev on Twitter and they'll just respond. Most times not. Most times they would, instead of just ignoring you. And if they are ignoring you, they're probably just like deep focused learning or working something around that, or they just might not see it because maybe they have a bunch of people. For example, today I just retweeted stuff on symbolic execution. He's a lead security researcher at Spearbit. He's a formal verification lead at Ethereum Foundation. And yeah, just from that, I entered his DMs. Now we're following each other. It's really quite easy and surprising as well.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like this in basically Web 2, where you have a really high up, you think really high up in like a corporate skyrise tower, and you're like, how the fuck am I going to message them? How am I going to get in contact with them?
Like no one is messaging the top Amazon developer for, I guess, tips on microservices or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then in Twitter, you can just message anyone. They'll be like, yup, here you go. Let me help you out. Let's jump on a call. But you've also done a fair bit of auditing as well, right? So I guess, what do you think makes TrailerBit so good at auditing, and what's established their brand in a way?
I think like we're obviously like pretty good auditors in our own right. Sometimes we miss bugs, things happen, but like I think in general, like we just have people, who have traditional experience in like Web 2. And so like carrying that over, we can leverage those people. But as I said before, I think our main selling point is honestly just like our tools and like secure development practices. Because there are a lot of, as you can see on like the internet, there are a lot of like really talented auditors out there. And I think we're also some of them. I know like there are some of my coworkers who don't have good or anything. They just hunker down and work, but they're like seriously some of the smartest people like I've ever met. And it's just amazing like how much they know. So I think we just have a lot of like industry experience in security in general, and we kind of leverage that. I wouldn't say there's like some secret like auditing formula or something that we have. We have a lot of experience, we leverage it, and we're unique in that we build tools and we like help people have more secure development practices, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely being around people that are smarter than you and have expertise in different fields, you can all combine and share experience and knowledge and kind of boost everybody to get people up to a higher level. So it definitely makes sense that you curate a bunch of knowledge from just sharing within the team. But I also think another interesting thing is your tools. You don't actually close source them, you open source them, which is interesting because you would think that a company would basically close source all their IP and use it for financial gain. If someone wants to have an audit, they can get like a special deal where they use all your in-house tools. But it's not the case with TrailerBits, is it? It's all open source.
That's also something I really like is Slither just has, I think it's just like an AGPL license, right? So anyone can use it, just build on top of it. Because I genuinely think like company just wants to help the ecosystem gets better, right? Because like we obviously could have made fuzzing or anything as like a SaaS, but like it's better if your average developer just learns how to use Echidna and they can write their own fuzz harnesses. That way, the bar for security just goes up higher and the ecosystem is just better as a whole. So that's something I really do admire from like the people at my company for just making some of our tools open source.
And I think that also gives a lot of exposure and a lot of developers having eyes on these tools to make them even better. And that's also another way of onboarding good talent as well. Through open source contributions, you can see who's good, who's not, who's making like a lot of commitments. Then you're like, okay, this person is contributing a lot. Let's try and get in touch with them so they can do it for us.
Actually, a lot of people who are hired on the blockchain team, I guess they just started by making a lot of contributions to Slither, and then like from there, you talk to them and you're like, oh, wow, these people are like really intelligent. And another thing that I really like about open source is like there are a lot of people outside the company who still contribute to like Slither too. So it makes it like really nice just like for everyone to kind of just help build a tool that everyone can use. And it's just super awesome because the industry goes better, like our tool gets better. And so
Boundary as well. Like it's such a staple in blockchain development. And basically the team just poaches like top contributors to like Reef, Forge, all that kind of stuff. So it is really like a great tool to get great gateway to get your name out there and kickstart your career, or even just like switch to like a more experienced team, something that's more advanced. Because Sliver is also like a staple in security as well. It's always referenced whenever you speak about Web3 security tooling.
Yeah, and that's another thing I'd like to touch on is, like I feel like, especially in like Web3 or just maybe, I'm not sure how it is in computer science in general, but like Web3 specifically, it's, you don't need a degree or like a resume or anything. It's like you make a PR, like that shows that you know what you're doing, right? So in my opinion, it feels more like merit-based than, oh, what are your qualifications? Did you like sleep through all your classes and then like somehow ace the test because you copied off someone and then you have a degree? I did go through college and everything. I'm not going to say it's completely useless. I do think in the modern day, especially in like our field, it's if you want to learn something, you have like all the resources on the internet, which is really great. and you can just start contributing, and then eventually like you'll learn, and then you'll be picked up by someone, or you'll just gain a lot of experience that way. It's not like, chemistry, right? There's no like equipment cost. If you have an internet connection and a laptop, you should be more or less fine.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need specific formulas and learning all these equations to basically do something. Don't have to get them correct every single time for it to work. You basically just trial and error in this field.
Yeah.
And through trial
You
and
learn
error,
pretty rapidly because of that. I think you learn what works and what doesn't really fast.
yeah, and when you do it practically, you make connections, much more meaningful connections than just reading some words on a textbook. Let's say you read an article online in something related to, let's say, form of verification, then you want to implement it, then you're going to make that connection much quicker than if you're just doing like a test, like a quiz and reading a theory book. And it's something that you're also very passionate about as well, because you wouldn't be learning it if you didn't want to pursue it. Maybe there is some other cases if you're in a job and you have to learn it.
Yeah,
But
that's another thing too. Is I feel like everyone who works here, like they just got into space because they genuinely enjoy it, right? Sure, some people are like, oh, I just want a lot of money or whatever. Everyone who just like makes open source contributions, you can tell they like actually like what they're doing, right? No one is just gonna contribute in their free time because they have to.
yeah, it's more like a passion, like a burning desire. Oh, this is super interesting. Let me see what I can do. Let me see how I can help basically elevate this tool that I find super cool to the next level and be like a core, basically, reason why it's getting there. And that, yeah, it establishes your name, just like how public contests show your skills through reports and statistics. It's the same with open source contributions. It is like a global leaderboard in a way. And the teams that host it are looking at that leaderboard. And even other teams, if they want to poach someone that's working on the Foundry thing, they're like, oh, I see you have a lot of knowledge in this. You want to come slide in and work with us? On the auditing side, how do you guys like write reports that are different to like public contests as well?
This is another thing, I guess, that I should probably touch on, because the main deliverable obviously is like the final report, right? And if you do a contest, you have a POC, like you write it up, you write, this is the issue, check, you give like a brief, like 2-word description. And then it's a lot of our reports, especially like the public facing ones, is you have to like figure out like how to word it correctly. Like, are you conveying things like properly? You have to give like good examples. You have to give them like recommendations for short-term and long-term things. And you have to like figure out when it would be exploited. I think the report writing is like a big part of like how we're different, because not obviously unlike C4 or Sherlock, you don't have to write an in-detail report. And then another thing is when it comes to writing a report is you have to be like, since other people are going to see it, it's like the main deliverable. You have to like make sure the grammar is correct, make sure like the punctuation is correct, and make sure like everything sounds well, flows smoothly, explains the problem. And yeah, so I guess report writing is something that I think is pretty different. It's almost like a skill in itself, because like you can write, oh, I understand what the issue is. Can you explain the issue to someone? Because the person who reads the report, it's not even be like the developers or anything. It might be like the CEO or something. He knows what solidity is, but he doesn't understand. Can you convey the issue to him? It does take some skill to like explain yourself eloquently and do that.
Yeah, convey the issue in a concise and detailed way, so where someone that's not even a developer can understand. Because that's going to be more often not the case. It's usually the higher ups, not the developers, that are making all these deals and trying to fix their code.
Yeah, because the developers, they wrote the code base. If you explain something, most of them are like, they'll understand what you're talking about unless it's super complicated. Can you convey the same thing to someone who they barely understand how the code works?
Yeah. And then that's who you're trying to retain, because they have basically all the connections to these developers, and they'll more often than not have more work for you. And you want to establish these connections as well, so you can grow your network, etc., keep people on retainer, all that kind of stuff. So I guess if you were to like prepare getting into trailer bits again, what do you think you would do next time? I know that you got it on the first try, but let's say like was there anything that you saw that you weren't really prepared for, or were you kind of like overall?
I guess one thing I would do, I guess if I had to do it over again, is I would probably just get my feet wet more with contests, because I think that's a much faster learning opportunity. Like I didn't do many contests, like because I was just like, oh dude, like these people are making like money. There's no way I'm good enough for that yet. I didn't think you just get your feet wet in them. Another thing I would recommend is like contributing to like our tools, seeing how they work, and just like understanding program analysis a bit more. Because when you're hired, you're not just like there to like audit all the time and find bugs, right? Like you also like have to like learn a bit more about program analysis, how to contribute to our tools, how to like make our tools better. Yeah, besides that, I would just recommend keeping up to date with the latest hacks, like understanding the quirks of the EVM, how it works. If you do those 3 things, then you're like pretty good. Yeah, we'll definitely want to be in touch with you.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking on your experience in Trailer Bits, if you weren't a part of Trailer Bits and you wanted to learn all of the stuff you've learned now, what do you think is the strategy to touch on all of this stuff and go as deep as you have in Trailer Bits without the mentorship?
That's a good question, actually. I've probably been helped more times than I can count by the people at my company because they're all super nice and friendly and really helpful. But I think if I wanted to get up to speed, the nice thing is there's a lot of online resources for everything. It's not like there's just some internal magic book that we have that like explains everything. There's a lot of resources online. I would just, in terms of getting up to speed on all my knowledge, I would just go through all the CTFs again, then just read past audit reports from everyone, see what kind of issues do code arena, the standard advice that's given to everyone, and then because I think that generally will take you like 80 to 90% of the way. And then I would just go through like GitHub, go on like Slither, Echidna, like kind of understand a bit of how they work. Echidna is written in Haskell, so it might be a bit like more difficult, but Slither is in Python, right? So you look through it, understand how it works, and then just try to like write your own detector, see if you can do that. Because we actually have a lot of like open source contributions for detectors. So I would just get my feet wet, like just go and try do all the CTFs. In terms of program analysis, I think it's a bit more tricky because I obviously have leading experts in the world who I'll just be like, I don't get this. Explain it to me, please. And they're like, yeah, of course. I think it just take more time, but you can go through like some books. I'm pretty sure there's some open source books on like static analysis. There's some courses online for like compiler theories. If you want to learn a bit more about like how compilers work, the different optimizations they do, or lexers, parsers, etc. I think you can learn online. I'm just really grateful. My learning was like sped up because I have all these great people around me.
Have you learned much about symbolic execution at all?
A bit. I guess like on audits, formal verification, like symbolic execution is pretty cumbersome because of the state explosion. So like we don't really use it that much. I remember, I think I'm not sure who said this, but it might have been like someone from runtime verification, which specializes in like formal verification. But to do formal verification, it should take around 9 times the length of time it took for you to develop something. So like on a 4-week audit, it's like ridiculous to, assume that we can use like solvers and stuff like that or generate constraints and things like that. But yeah, I am a bit familiar with it. I wouldn't say I'm very knowledgeable because I always compare myself to people at my company who are like world-class experts. So yeah, I wouldn't say I know that much.
Yeah, I think you're definitely in the perfect environment to basically accelerate your career as fast as humanly possible, right? You're around world-class experts, you're doing kind of everything that's relating to cybersecurity, even got your interest of cryptography. Yeah, it just sounds like the perfect world. I wonder if you build any tools from scratch there as well, or is it just contribute to what's already existing?
We definitely are building some things from scratch. I can't say too much because obviously we're just building them from scratch. But yeah, it's not like we only like modify our existing tools. We're definitely like looking for, I guess, like making new stuff. And it's really cool because you get to like work with a lot of different people from the company, like different divisions in work, like building these things. So you get to see like how like a lot more experienced people would do things. And yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how they approach a quote-unquote startup. Each one of them could be considered a startup as well. You turn them into a SaaS or something. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see like their design patterns and how they basically build an architecture from scratch. I think it's very valuable to see that from like world-class developers compared to just going at it by yourself until it works, hitting a roadblock, then going again.
Yeah, that's something else. Like if I had to like code everything by myself, I would still just be writing like really shitty JavaScript programs. But like I have all these people around me, I think I've grown a lot better. I've just become leaps and bounds better at coding because I like started with no experience around almost a year and a half ago. And now like I would say I'm pretty comfortable writing code in almost any programming language. Okay, not like Haskell or like Erlang or functional stuff. Like in common programming languages, Rust, Go, like TypeScript, whatever.
Yeah, I was like, damn, Haskell. This guy's a master. Super interesting. Is there anything you want to talk about as well?
That's a great question, dude. Just interested in a whole bunch of stuff, doing cool things. Like I think in terms of our audits, we audit a lot more general stuff. So like we have expertise in different areas. Like in Katarina Sherlock, is just like strictly like Solidity stuff, right? More or less. But like we do node audits, all-chain audits. So we kind of have like a lot of different experience in a lot of things. So yeah, it's not just like we know only Solidity. Like we do all sorts of audits.
Do you do bytecode audits?
Well, we've done projects that are like pretty much written in assembly, pure assembly. We have like familiarity with that. We understand the EVM really well because, as I said before, Slither has its own IR, right? To build something like that, you do need to understand this is how Solidity works at a very fine level.
Yeah. I think bytecode audits are very interesting. Like I recently started that, and it is quite fun. The surface level isn't as big, but it is quite funny how simple like some attack vectors occur.
Yeah, the YOL is notorious for just being like having so many flipguns. We definitely don't recommend people using things in assembly all the time because it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot if you don't know what you're doing. And even like experienced people, you know, they like miss a return data size check or something, and then it just screws up everything, or they don't clean. Like, I think Solidity has like a lot of quirks, especially when you go down to the assembly level. Like, for example, in Solidity, everything is just like a 256-bit word, right? Even if you do operations on things that aren't 256 bits, like the dirty bits aren't cleaned. You have to clean them yourself. There's just so many more things you have to know. Like, you also have to do like contract existence check, because that high level Solidity will take care of that for you. There's just like going down to the low level, like you need to know what you're doing like very well, and there's a lot of flipguns, so we'd recommend against that unless you like really need the gas savings.
Yeah, for sure. It gets quite complex. You have to basically manage the whole state, basically memory and the stack all in your mind. And just like one opcode can completely ruin the whole sequence and screw everything up. And I think the tooling isn't actually that good either for that kind of stuff as well. So it becomes even harder. But yeah, man, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully you have as well. I think this was your first kind of like public speaking thing you've done. Is it?
Yeah, dude, I really enjoyed this.
Oh man, yeah, so did I. I'm super thankful you came on, and I'm sure a lot of people would definitely get a lot of insight from this. And even you, looking back at this after some time in your career, you'll be like, damn, I really come a long way.
I'll probably just cringe at my voice because every time I hear my voice on a recording, it makes my ears bleed. But yeah, I'll definitely like. It should be interesting to look at this a couple of months later down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for coming on. And if anyone in the audience wants to recommend someone to come on, just DM me on Twitter at DeGatchi or at scrapingbits, or give me an email at scrapingbits@gmail.com and we'll look into it. But other than that, thank you so much, Technovision, for coming on, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me.